Hello, everyone, and welcome. My name's Maria Spies, and I'm the co-CEO of Holland IQ. Welcome to this session. Super excited to be joined by Ted Chen, the Vice President of Globalization for ClassIn. And as many of you know, ClassIn is an amazing success story, a really, really interesting company working in a very interesting space. Welcome, Ted.
Thank you so much, Maria, for this invitation. I'm super glad to monitor on social media that your 100 Days of Impact has been going really well so far. And I am very proud of the fact that I sort of nudged a couple of my colleagues, including our C-suites, to your Singaporean and Indonesian summits. Hello, everyone. My name is Ted Chen, and I represent ClassIn for this session. I'm very eager to share with you for the past 8 years where our company has been learning about the K-12 anti-learning landscape in East Asia and how we're continuing to improve and enable this prominent, very, very interesting marketplace.
Great. Thanks, Ted. Okay, so the session today, we have around 30 minutes. Ted's going to walk us through the story of ClassIn and also what's happening in the market. And then, we'll have a bit of a discussion throughout that presentation and then also more discussion at the end. And so I'm going to hand over to you, Ted, to take it away.
Thank you so much. All right. Really briefly, I guess I'll start with an introduction of what ClassIn is. I know, despite being a very dominant player in EdTech in this sector, and definitely occupying the lane of sort of hybrid learning solutions for quite a while now, and is the industry-defining solution in a sense in this space. We still have a long way to go of sort of morphing out of the startup phase in a substantial company. So let me just introduce our companies and our products very briefly. We are sort of starting from the learning environment software. We have been gaining a lot of traction in East Asia and across Southeast Asia. Currently, especially with the COVID boost, we have 50 million users worldwide that is using our virtual classroom, as well as a sort of basic level of LMSs as their primary learning software. Very happy to be enabling more than 30 million sessions every month happening all across the world. And this is an astounding statistics for me to learn about when I joined the company earlier this year as well. It is a company that is heavily engineering heavy because this is a very complex system that we're going to build, and I'll explain why it is complex later on in our conversation. But we do have a lot of globalization priorities at the moment, and me heading over our operations in US, Korea, and Japan, all the developed markets, but also as well as a substantial operational team that has been operating in Southeast Asia for quite some time. We have 3 primary products, starting with, as mentioned, the industry-defining virtual classroom, and soon to become a full-scale LMS by the end of the year. Is already in company beta. Very excited about that. We have a hardware classroom LT product that really enables students to tune in to a physical classroom wherever he or she is. He can be another offsite facing a big TV screen, or he can just use your tablet with our ClassIn app. So it's really just about facilitating all of that dynamics and making sure students joining from everywhere can have the same kind of engagement and see the same blackboard as the students in that physical classroom. And we will be launching and already small scale testing the teaching material marketplace product. It's sort of like a GitHub for teachers product. We won't be heavily focusing on this session, but if you're a publisher, feel free to reach out to us and learn more about it. Because we have been operating in this lane, sort of being very lonely in this lane for quite some time, we were able to establish a lot of global partners that are super prominent, K-12 elite schools and higher education institutions, including industry-leading tutoring solutions as well, like I Can Read, Lingoace, Học Mai in Vietnam, as well as some very advanced technology partners as integrational partners, which is signed an MOU with Amira Learning, which is a really incredible product in AI-enabled literacy coaching. And that is generally how we're approaching the market at the moment, because we're infrastructural. We can hold and facilitate and enable all kinds and all sector learning in live stream format, and that's been our progress so far. So today, I'd like to, the first section of our talk, I want to focus on a little bit just the big picture of what is happening in K-12 schools and what is happening in K-12 tutoring in the East Asian market, because those are our prominent client segments, and we do have a lot of devotion and passion in enabling both of these two sectors. So with K-12 schooling, the biggest impact heavy area, what we're seeing across East Asia is a really quite homogeneous landscape, starting with very high enrollment rates and compulsory most of the time to K-12, K-9, and in Korea it's K-12. So like the government really spends a lot of resources, funding and activation in local, especially disadvantaged areas, to motivate students to get the education that they need and have a substantial leverage when they go into society. And Japan, we're using Japan as the sort of primary example on this slide, but they're actually a pretty lone wolf figure for the GDP spent on education. Is one of the lowest because their higher ed and high school education are heavily privatized. But in China, this is a 4% spend, middle of the road of OECD, and in Korea, Singapore, they have some of the highest GDP per capita on education. So the government really, really cares, and they do utilize a lot of resources and funding to make sure that the educational market is well funded and financed. So those are sort of the highlights of East Asia's schooling system, but with very strong historical and cultural inclination, with the exam, the big exam at the very end of K-12 being the primary selection process methodology, not only to students going into college, but also to class mobility in massive countries. We have seen on the front lines, the students and teachers are not living their best life in a lot of senses. It has low student satisfaction with schoolwork. And very few instructional methodologies to really engage with students inside the class, because most of them are primarily lecture style, very much like one-to-many, one-directional education processes. That is still the dominant instructional strategy in East Asian schools. And what that leads to is the faculties are have to always juggle between schoolwork preparation and monitoring student progresses, long instructional hours. And that is why a lot of them are reporting, a significant portion of them are reporting work-related stress. And again, these are statistics or phenomena, I think, that are quite prevalent across all the economies that we're seeing in this sector. So, yeah.
Ted, can I just ask a question about that? Because on your last slide, the arrow at the bottom talked about shift to student-led pedagogies, and we see throughout this summit, and from others in the market as well, and from some sort of dynamics that we're seeing across the East Asia market, new solutions for supporting the well-being of student, focusing more on the student, like you say, student-led pedagogies, although historically and still dominating is a sort of very sort of disciplined and, as you say, one-to-many approach to teaching. Are you seeing the movement for an interest in student-led pedagogies coming from all sides, from the students themselves, from parents, from teachers, and from government? Are we just seeing the beginnings of that, or do you think actually we're absolutely on the road to changing or modifying or including more student-led pedagogies in formal and after-school processes? Where is that sort of coming from?
Yeah, so I think there's two directions. So the top-down, and we're going to touch on this a little bit later as well, on policy side, there has been a pretty consistent policy directive from all these governments, basically saying, we need to have a more holistic approach to education. We got to cultivate both academic rigor and also character, individuality,
Yes.
and soft core skills, basically, to help them prepare for actual real world settings. But I think there's a disconnect between policymaking, pedagogical thinking, and the actual on-the-ground execution when the exam was such a looming presence in teacher and students' lives. But there is a gradual shift as more post-80s generations, as for example in China, post-80s is considered generally has been growing up in the or the most liberal ages or periods in modern China. They have sort of happiness metrics they want to track when it comes to student well-being. So their children would oftentimes be enrolled in extracurricular activities for after school instead of just another academic booster. So definitely, I think there's a general trend, but with the top down, there's a disconnect from the school leadership and down, and district leadership and down. And with bottom up, it's like parents are pushing for this, and the schools, especially private sector schools, are trying to cater to that more and more as a way of servicing what the clients actually want.
Yeah, makes sense. Thanks.
Yeah. So moving on to that, like it's a good segue to, I guess, talk about tutoring as well, because this is definitely the biggest academic tutoring market in the world. It has the largest tutoring operation by both spending and enrollment, and China, Korea, Japan basically host the top three of the entire world tutoring revenue, with China being the undisputed dominant player in the sector. And what has happened in the last 10 years really is just this formidable ascension of students being enrolled into tutoring as climbing in penetration rate. At the moment, it was averaging across all these economies at a majority rate for metropolitan students, and what that translates to is 6 hours of commitment in offline or after school tutoring, and obviously with that huge demand, the cost is not insignificant either. For I would say tier 3 parent in Chinese cities, their seasonal passes for offline boosters would easily equate to maybe half of their monthly salary for the kids. So it is a significant commitment, both on time and monetary. It has both of these restraints to the family, and that is why we're seeing a shift, or very aggressive shift, especially in China, in moving things online, because it does save a lot of cost. The tutoring companies don't need to pay the rent anymore. That's 30-40% of their margins, and the parents would therefore benefit from the price decline. And the VCs definitely see a lot of opportunities in this, even if we take a long-term view, not just the sort of bubbly area of the past 3 years. Even if we take 10-year view from HoloIQ database, we can see this, that the Chinese educational VC has invested 40% of their entire portfolio into EdTech on tutoring, this one segment, and that is bar none the highest in the world, and it overshadows every other single lane that we're seeing in Chinese VC movements over the past decade. So what that says to us is that the foundational need hasn't really moved, the bottom up that we talked about before. And what we want when we are helping the teacher and students out of this conundrum of like really just overtly long participation is just maximize the efficiency and enjoyment of after class, have more, again, like student-led pedagogies, and make sure whatever the teacher's arsenal is, it has all the tools that he or she desires to make sure that this pedagogy can actually be implemented, even if they're operating in a tutoring agency or online tutoring sectors.
Can I just also make one comment, which is very, very important on the points that you were just making, because in the past, I guess the technology tools just haven't really been there to support well thought through pedagogies, and now technology tools are focusing on, and the technology is advanced such that there is more opportunity for sort of effective pedagogies, essentially. And then the other side of the coin, which I think you're going to talk about a little bit, is the other side of the coin is the capability of teachers to actually redesign for or in hybrid environments. That's the other big area of work. And from what you said in the beginning about where you're heading with your three products, the teacher in one. I'm looking forward to hearing a bit more about that. But
Yeah.
that's the third leg of the chair, isn't it? How the capacity building of teachers and their knowledge about how to actually design good pedagogies for good pedagogy in blended or online environments, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I do want to highlight this comment, to be honest, because I think I've been in touch with global teachers, various subjects and across school ages, as in my role for VP for globalization. And honestly, I do believe East Asian teachers, they're among the most committed teacher groups we've seen, and they endure really incredibly long hours and very high devotion to individual students, because usually they head over a class for a significant 2 or 3 years of their lives. So they get to develop this huge bond and a personal bond as well with each and individual students as well as their families, and they really group prep their lessons and really sustain a commitment to this one subject and this whole course of career in their school age. So it is one of the most effective teaching faculties around the globe, and now we're building a tool to help them really do their job really properly and transition from that offline to online journey. So to basically hone in on both of the points we're making in K-12 and tiering, what we're seeing here is a reflection of PISA scores. You can see from this chart, it's very clear. East Asian students have very high performance scores across, in terms of academic achievement, but that comes at a huge sacrifice in terms of after school hours, especially the Chinese total learning hours per week is 57 plus. That is, maybe 20% above the OECD average, as well as a significant below average performance in student satisfaction. So it doesn't have a cost. It has a result that is delivered. It has a cost that's associated with it. That is the general landscape that we're operating in. So what I want to move on to next is basically a rethink on how do we approach these true problems and really deliver on those promises that we set, maximize student efficiency and shift to student-led pedagogies. Is that what we're seeing over the course of COVID, that the hybrid learning model really works. It is something that is research backed. So I want to start with that foundational research, because that's how our company think about its product designs. We look at what is out there in learning science, and we collaborate with leading teachers college around the globe to do these longitudinal studies. And several of these studies that I usually quote, as seen here, is that first, classroom is a huge factor to boost learning outcomes. 25% of change in academic progress over a school year can be associated somehow with classroom design. And obviously, in COVID, that means how the virtual classroom is constructed. And I do want to point out to number 3 as well, like there was preliminary experimentative studies in the US done, 91% the students outpace traditional classroom enabled students. So hybrid and blended does work, and we need to shift towards that to cater to what the technology is already enabling, what the teachers and students are already adapting to, instead of reverting entirely back to the old models, because that is inferior from these studies, what they tell us. And essentially, what we know as well as from these researches is that, and our internal data, is that global learners are already past the age of early adoption, entering the early maturity, because this is a significant statistics change, as well as public sentiment change for public schools, because prior to the pandemic, we only had pilot schools in K-12, and within the past 2 or 3 years, we're gaining thousands in the Chinese market, and in Southeast Asia, like Filipino primary schools, we serve hundreds of them already. So this is a very huge mentality change. Rigorous research, and we hope to keep building upon that as our central thesis of product building. But again, this does come with implementational challenges, because not every school uses a solution like ClassIn. Most are really just struggling to get into emergency remote teaching instead of actually implementing hybrid pedagogies. So that is something that we see quite a lot. And one of our major pitches is really just, let me think about what is the actual implementation challenges for you, right? So for students, there's prominent Zoom fatigue, very well reported phenomenon. I won't substantiate on it. The chart you're looking at right now, with student acceptance, it's most regarding that, like whether I'm still able to be effective in this learning environment. And with teachers, it's more about just juggling in between all the tools that is presented to them, because there are so many niche tools, especially from US EdTech. Average teacher uses 80 plus teaching tools and EdTech tools every month as a learn platform statistics. And when I saw it, I was just genuinely shocked. How do they even juggle all of that? And it is a huge change management problem for the school leaders, because the teachers just don't have the bandwidth to accept another niche product anymore, either in content or tool management. So that is the challenge for school leaders. Obviously, they have also to think about risks that associate with it, like compliance, security, data leaks, a very huge topic in the developed world right now, when it comes to school privacy and student privacy, as well as DEI-minded pedagogies to really be inclusive. But on that part, what we're approaching or what we're thinking about is that we can address all these problems, but it's really at a point where we have to think about, essentially tackle each stakeholder's thinking and address these needs individually. So here are our big proposition, right? So with Zoom fatigue, what we believe is a class is not a conference. It is just simply not, because a class or any kind of teaching environment, if you really think about it, is among the most difficult and complex human interactions out there. Like you can think about like difficult human interactions, like going on a date or hold a birthday party and you deliver a speech. None of these are even on the part of teaching, where it's microsecond decision making. It's reading each and every student's faces. It's engaging with oftentimes disinterested audience. It is very hard a human interaction to facilitate. So we have to be able to facilitate all of those engagements that the teachers were supposed to do in an offline setting and mimic them online. One example that I'm showing here is a breakout room feature that we use. And essentially what we enable is for the teachers to do three things in breakout room features. And the first one is to sit in on any round table that she organized. The second is to join in on the conversation and actually participate in that conversation. And the third is just, like the teacher would just pull back from all the students and go back on the podium and say, hey, class, when you're doing this assignment, think about the things that I talked about before 10 minutes ago, and keep that breakout room intact without breaking them. It's really just something that is like a broadcast in the middle of it all. Because that is what real world teachers do when students are in breakout sessions. But a lot of the conversations, they only can do one of them. But we really try to mimic that offline setting as much as possible, even though it is technically pretty challenging. And that's why we have so many engineers working on these problems, very, very detailed and real world minded. And not only the mimicry, we also want to think about elevation. So like there are a lot of pedagogies that were just not simply enabled in offline settings. For example, I was just reading this EdWeek article 10 minutes ago on computer science being extremely hard to teach in the American schools. And I think this is a global phenomenon as well, because the curriculum is not standardized, teachers are insufficient, blah, blah. But also, one of the key teaching scenario in CS is just examine the code. How is this code formatted? And I'll tell you that our solution enables copy paste and automatically reads whatever language you're using when coding. So you can just copy paste from a TXT and we can format that code for you in our clipboard. And with our screen sharing, we can also enable the CS teacher to just say, okay, I want Jesse and James to share their screen with me, and let's examine like what went wrong, like why not running properly. And as soon as they say yes to screen sharing, their screens is going to be there side by side. And with the teacher, one click of a button, he or she is going to be able to show that work to the entirety of class. and that takes 3 seconds.
Mhm.
Previously, this needs print it out or use a projector or some kind of copy paste into like a Google Doc maybe. But all that takes way too long in our opinion. So we just want to enable all these pedagogies, both mimicry and elevation of the
Yeah.
traditional classroom.
Yeah.
Yeah, and with teachers, this is the same. Like we want power over simplicity. This is sort of a contrarian idea. I was talking with a very prominent venture capital yesterday in San Francisco, and they said like power over simplicity. We've never heard that in EdTech, but that's essentially, as I said, this is a complex interaction. So we
Yes.
actually need a one-stop instead of just juggling between 10 tools at the same time, and each fix a very niche problem very well. It was one of the most sort of enlightening remark I heard over the past several months of me being in class, and that's what the CEO says to me. It's just when we really approach frontline teachers, what we see they love is really just have one classroom where it enables them to do their job and every facet of it properly.
Yeah.
And finally, just very quickly, I'm wrapping up on the leaders. It's just that with change management, we think a lot of the change management really lies in the interoperability. So if we have one gatekeeper, a closed loop ecosystem that really guards all the student data and security and cares about it deeply, as well as offering all these tools to transition seamlessly into each other. Like you finish our course material in the lower right screen, and then students can immediately click on that in their own LMSs, then like it really just shift a lot of friction in terms of adoption. So that's what we want to do for school leaders as well.
Yeah. Thanks for that sort of overview. I guess one of the things we're definitely seeing in the market is, as you say, EdTech historically has been full of point solutions, tools to do this little thing or this little thing, and there's lots of complex interactions in learning. And so whether from some sort of assessment to communication or whatever it may be, there's lots. And I'm not surprised to hear that 80 EdTech tools for a teacher is something that they would use. And so that does get very complex. And as you say, the possibility for sort of issues with security is maximized when you have that many tools and so on. And so we are definitely seeing in the market a move more towards the ecosystem type approach for platforms. So things are wrapped and wrapped into one environment, and the ability to do lots of different types of teaching and learning processes within that one environment. Obviously it makes sense, but the 21st century version of that, rather than the 1990s version was an ERP system that was sort of structured and difficult to use, that people the system dictated the process. But the 21st century version of that is of course something quite flexible and interoperable, like you say. It's extremely important, and those issues about security and connectivity and the sort of the at the tech stack level is very, very important, even more important now than ever before. And so it's really interesting to see you move through those sorts of phases and sort of I guess focus on the stakeholders involved here: students, teachers, leaders, and of course parents go all the way through that if we're talking about the K-12 as well.
Totally. Thank you so much for that remark. I do want to point out that like judging from a stakeholder, like taking a very frontline perspective, that has always been sort of like the ethos of our company. We know and this helps with general business progression as well, because when you really build a tool that teachers love, they will have so much advocacy power within the school organization. And leveraging back to our sort of globalization story, what we are seeing at the early pandemic with Filipino schools adopting us is really just a lot of these Filipino teachers, they have already been using ClassIn to teach Chinese kids English overseas, right? And this is a very sort of globalized product. And when they went back to school as faculties and they faced with this humongous challenge of navigating through COVID,
Yeah.
the first thing they did is really just went to the school leader and say, this is a product to use. Like, we love this product. Please start implementing them. And suddenly we just have hundreds of clients in the Philippines without even having a team being present there. And now we have to go global. So it was really like a two-way lane of us really listening to the users and building features for them and having the tools that they need, and also them referring back to us and helping us expand and continue to build on that frontline knowledge and optimize for user experiences.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So I guess just the final portion, I just want to very quickly wrap up on some of the detailed features of ClassIn. Obviously, you can access this on classin.com, but just want to highlight a couple of the slides that we're seeing here. This is the ClassIn product on the mainframe. You can see there are 30 plus teaching tools, especially on drag and drop STEM experiments. And all the multi-way screen sharing that we mentioned, breakout rooms, these are really something that made us stand out. So it's not just rudimental like timer stopwatch. Any EdTech company can build that, but it's really just solving for frontline use cases. And this is the latest product that I just mentioned. Essentially, it's GitHub for teachers. What that means is you want finalized, centrally managed coursework control from the school down to enable all the math teachers to be able to build upon each other's work instead of going to a random marketplace, buy it back, and just work on your local server using your class and not share it with your faculties. Because we know teachers are so super passionate about sharing, super passionate about sharing their work. They're super passionate about making sure that what they prepared is heard and maximized in impact. And this product really helped accentuate that kind of collective knowledge, as well as giving them a much easier workflow to present their work, because TeacherIn has an interface directly on the right toolbar in the learning environment interface. So you can just click and you get into this interface. So you don't even have to carry USBs anymore. Like, everything is in the cloud, literally 2 clicks away. It's really easy to manage, as well as for the students. Like, once you get off this class, in your group chat, there's going to be a tab, and you can just click, this is all the files that's associated with this class, and you can just tap in without asking the teacher, oh, can you share that file directly with me? So this is a product that has huge traction with early on publishers and schools that we talk to across Asia, and we think it's going to do wonders for this material workflow. And finally, this is the ClassIn X classroom IoT product that I was talking about. And the illustration says it perfectly, but I just want to point out this one very powerful thing. At the end of that main classroom, at the back end of that main classroom, there's a stationary camera. But what it does is it tracks the teacher using artificial intelligence image recognition. And so, like, especially in more activity-based classroom pedagogies, the teacher will roam around the classroom a lot, and students tuning in from afar need to be able to see her gestures, her facial expression, and hear the cadence through these ceiling microphones wherever he or she is present in the classroom. So that is something that we really care about, and we have done also like optimization for small scale camera that teachers can buy at home that has that tracing feature. So you can think about extracurricular teachers, like a dance teacher, literally using this tool hitched onto their laptop and just walk around the room and show all the yoga poses, all right, like that, or Tai Chi styles to a wide audience. So those are all doable through the ClassIn ecosystem, and we're very proud of this. And again, the most important thing is that all these are interoperable products. They talk to each other, they complement each other because they're all in-house developed. And very quickly, we'll look into the future. So what we're looking at is that all the products that we're talking about, we're really just at the beginning of thinking about the hybrid classrooms. And despite our 8-year history, we're still just a startup, and we're thinking along with the whole educational world what the next 10 years of classroom transition is going to look like. And here we are on this 2x2 block. We're probably at the middle of it all. We're there with hybrid teaching already, and we're experimenting with intelligent classrooms. But we also want to invite our industry partners to work with us to enable AR VR content and think about how we can enable that from a hardware perspective, and really incorporate a lot of the AI tools like mirror learning, for example, into our system of solutions to complement all that after class workflow as an LMS provider. So if you want to reach out to us, feel free to do that. We have emails on the final slide. Feel free to reach out to whoever is in charge of our country managers, or if you're a provider that wants integration or collaboration, very happy to be speaking with you. Just send us an email. All right. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you so much. That was great. I've just got a couple of comments where we're running right on time. So I've just got a couple of comments, which I think some of the concepts you talked about, of course, your ClassIn, but more importantly about the market and where that's heading, and how EdTech products or EdTech solutions can, sort of obviously follow where the market is heading. So a couple of things that struck me. One is, I think you're absolutely right that we are only really at the beginning of solutions for hybrid, because, doing something offline in a classroom and then swapping over and doing something online with a different system is not really designing for hybrid. And so it's just doing one and then the other. And so I think there's a long way to go, and it's a very exciting, I think, area for, really designing for hybrid and having both physical and, hardware, software, physical and digital, those sort of four elements, designing those together. I think we're definitely watching this whole space carefully, because there's a lot of traction in words. I think we're only at the beginning of actual actions, though, in terms of designing properly for hybrid. That's one thing. The second thing is your concept of mimicking to elevation, and I think that is really important, because taking something that you do exactly in a physical classroom and mimicking that only in a digital environment is good, but actually we need to get down to the underpinning foundations or assumptions or philosophy of the thing you do in the physical classroom, and then think about that in digital and redesign for digital to make the most of the digital environment, rather than just mimicking what one does.
Totally.
I think there's a lot in that, and designing rather than, as you say, just copying, essentially. I think that's
absolutely. I think a lot of publishers realize this already. Over the past several years, we see huge movement from top international publishers trying to go digital, and some of them succeed, some of them fail, occasionally miserably, but it is certain that at least from the actual curriculum provider's perspective, this movement has been ongoing for quite some time. And for us as a tool provider or platform provider, what we're thinking is really just how do we take the best use cases and best practices and make that as scalable as we can. Because of all the talk that we think about, when it comes to disadvantaged students and underrepresented communities, obviously we need to be able to serve them. But the study or learning only progresses when we look at what the best are doing, and we try to help bring that to be as scalable as possible. And some of the features that really accentuated before in my talk is really just operated from that thinking. Like, let's look at what the best teachers in the world are doing and make sure that is available to our mechanisms to every single student.
Yeah, for sure. And that leads to, that's exactly my third point, which is the concept of leveraging the collective knowledge, skills, wisdom, experience of teachers in a peer sort of environment, in terms of your, the third element, which is the GitHub for teachers, where all that, tens of years, maybe dozens of years of experience about designing classrooms and learning activities and curriculum in particular subjects can be shared amongst other teachers. I think leveraging that globally is really important and very powerful, and also elevates the sort of sort of honors and elevates teachers as well, and the skills that they have. Like you say, it's a complex activity, teaching and learning, and so these are very exciting developments. And I want to thank you again for joining us, and congratulations to ClassIn on your traction to date.
Thank you, Maria.
It's been sort of from our perspective fun to watch. No doubt from your perspective, a lot of hard work. But yeah, we look forward to continuing keeping in touch. And again, Ted, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. Thank you.
Okay. Bye, everyone. We'll see you at the next session.